Go ahead. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Green Space. I'm Shumita Basu. I'm a reporter, and I'm part of our We the Commuters team here at WNYC and Gothamist. And as you all know, we've spent the past few weeks doing some dedicated reporting on homelessness. Now, the reason why we, as a transit team, were reporting on homelessness is because we put out a survey a couple of months ago, and we were asking people to describe their commuting experience. And we heard in those responses a lot about homelessness. And it was clear to us that many commuters have daily interactions with people who are in need. And it makes them think about the city and its systemic problems. It makes them think about their own selfishness. It makes them think about the humanity and the dignity of others. And those are some pretty existential questions to be thinking about while you're commuting. So we wanted to recognize that. We also wanted to recognize that our subway stations and our transit system is not just a place of commuting, but for some people, it's a place to be living. It's a place of shelter. It's a place where you're often not even acknowledged by the rush of people around you. And it's a place that when you are acknowledged, your presence is called the problem. Now, tonight, we're going to talk about the actual problem. What causes people to end up living in subways and in stations? And we'll talk about what the state, the city, and the MTA are all doing to address homeless people in the transit system and what their responsibility is. We'll hear from people who've experienced homelessness, and we'll talk about proposed solutions to help people break the cycle and find safe, stable housing. You'll hear tonight from some members of the We the Commuters team. Some of our colleagues aren't here who contributed to our reporting, so that's Morella Ivrak from WNYC and Christopher Robbins from Gothamist. James Ramsey, reporter and writer of the We the Commuters email newsletter, is here. Hi, James. Where are you? You can raise your hand and take credit for that. There's James. Thanks, James. Yeah, subscribers are here. You read his newsletter. You know him. I also want to acknowledge and thank the photographer, Anne-Marie Rousseau. Her images are the ones that you've been seeing on the screens here in the green space as you enter tonight. And she captured scenes at a women's shelter in New York City in the early 1970s. You can see more of her work in her book. It's called Shopping Bag Ladies. And you can read more about her on Gothamist. Okay, let's get into it. First, I want us to take stock of how we got here. And to do that, I'm going to call on my fellow We the Commuters reporters to join me up here to talk about some of their recent reporting. Stephen Nessun and Jake Offenhartz, please come on up. Okay, Stephen, Jake.
Hello.
One thing that we've been hearing from a lot of commuters is that it feels like there are more people living in the subways and in these transit hubs, more people than ever before. Is that actually true? Is that supported by the numbers? And how reliable is the data that we have on these?
So I think it helps to take a step back here. And the way that we get our data on the unsheltered homeless population comes from something called the Hope Count. People here may know about it, maybe you volunteered, but once a year, hundreds of volunteers go in the streets and they count homeless people. The most recent count was in January, and I think they found that there were 2,200 people sleeping in the subway system on a given night. That's a 23% increase from the same count the year before. So that is more. But there are also a couple reasons for that. One of them is that it was one of the coldest nights of the year. I believe it was 10 degrees colder than the year before. A lot of people pointed out that as it gets colder, people move into the subway system. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. If you zoom out, you see a gradual increase over the past 5 years in the number of homeless people in the subway system. At the same time, though, there's definitely a lot of advocates who've kind of questioned this methodology. They say that this system of just sending people out one night a year and trying to count homeless people is not actually an effective means of figuring out the city's homeless population. They also say that it's kind of a way that the city lowballs the estimates and makes itself feel better about how they're tackling this problem. What we do have better numbers on, though, is the city's sheltered homeless population, and that has ballooned. That's at 64,000 around, according to the last report. And that is the largest increase over the last 10 years of any city in the country. 3/4 of that population is families. That is a major uptick right now.
And one thing that I have seen is that of that 64,000 or so, it's only about 4% of people who are actually living out on the streets and that you see on the subways. So what we're actually seeing, what people see on their commutes, is the tip of a very large iceberg of homelessness in the city. Stephen, you look like you want to add something.
No, I was just going to say, I think part of the reason that people are so focused on it as well is there's just a renewed focus on the subways. And really, back in 2017, I think we all noticed that the service was really declining. I think it hit a nadir at that point as far as delays, and people are getting frustrated. Your platform is overcrowded, your train is overcrowded, and just exacerbates all your sort of, frustration with the whole system. Mm-hmm. And you look around and it's like, and including, a late train and a crowded train and a hot platform, there's a lot of homeless people here too. So I feel like, a lot of negativity, but just a lot of focus as well on, what is going on with the subway system. And I think, that got lumped into all the malaise of the subways.
Stephen, you broke a story 2 weeks ago that the MTA is hiring 500 new transit police officers. And this came shortly after Governor Cuomo complained about quality of life issues related to the subway commute.
He said it was the worst he's ever seen.
Ever seen.
He hasn't been on the subway in almost 4 years.
Has he seen it?
Yeah. The last time he was on the subway, according to our, reporting anyways, was during when the Second Avenue subway opened.
Right. Oh my God. I guess my question is, how did we even get to this point where the MTA is hiring all of these new transit police officers to enforce issues related to homelessness, among other things, they say?
Well, I think part of it is going back to June when a report came out that the number of incidents involving the homeless on the subway had tripled over 10 years. That sounds really bad, but if you look at the numbers, according to the MTA anyways, there were 254 incidents involving the homeless in 2008. Last year, it was 856. So, it did triple.
Mm-hmm. And those are incidents that actually led to a delay, or those are...
Those are incidents. I guess the incidents that caused delay last year were 659.
Okay.
Put in the context of the MTA, there were 880,000 delays last year. So 659 is a low number.
Right.
But they are very unpleasant. They're shocking experiences for riders. And, the governor had been hearing about, MTA workers that have been assaulted by homeless people. A lot of this is anecdotal, a lot of it's one-off incidents, but, it got into his head anyways that this is a growing problem, and he does not want the bad publicity, and he does not want this, happening. So they announced they're going to deploy 500 police into the subway to tackle what they call quality of life crimes. That includes, homeless problems or incidents or problems caused by homeless people. That was in June, and they put in actually bridge and tunnel police and some NYPD. And now, what I broke the story recently was that they are going to go ahead and hire 500 MTA police just dedicated to quality of life issues.
I'm smiling because I'm remembering how you told me you broke the story, which was, Stephen, you noticed posters around on the subway. You want to tell people that?
Yeah, I mean, it's
talk
just
about a transit reporter. He's sitting on the subway looking around like, what should my next story be about? And you noticed recruitment posters?
Yeah, it was just recruitment on the new digital screens.
Right.
So I didn't,
hiring now.
It wasn't a, groundbreaking discovery, but it was like, you see something.
You were the first to make some calls on
report
it.
Something.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's as simple as that, folks. No, it's not as simple as that. Stephen was on the phone with so many people to confirm all that. Well, here in New York City, we have something that's called right to shelter. And it means that the city is legally obligated to find a bed for every person who needs one. The city will pay about $2 billion in shelter costs this fiscal year. What can both of you tell us about shelters and safe havens, and what have you heard from people who have experienced these places?
I think it's hard to generalize people's individual experiences at any of these different accommodations. The safe haven idea is relatively new. I think it's been around for 13 years, but it's growing. And as opposed to the shelter system, which has some of these more onerous application demands, it's a little bit more streamlined. There's not as many restrictions as far as like curfews and sobriety go. We have heard from people that they kind of like prefer this in a lot of ways to the shelter system in some cases. There's also a limited amount of beds, and it's not necessarily given that you can just, walk and get a safe haven accommodation. The shelter system is, kind of like a many-headed beast. Within the shelter system, there are commercial hotels, there are cluster sites, there are your traditional shelter accommodations. Those first two are actually supposedly being phased out. It's happening a little slower than the mayor said it was going to. There are people who say that the shelters are violent, or they say that they've had their stuff stolen. They have reasons not to want to go there.
We had a caller on the Brian Lehrer show this week who described it as a jail without guards.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, you've spoken to people who've been in the shelter system.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken, for this reporting, I met one guy who has a great experience. He was happy to get out of the subways and into a shelter. He has a place to go every night. I mean, he was a unique person in that he actually likes hanging out in the subways, chit-chatting with people. So he goes back there during the day, into the shelter at night. But, everyone, like you said, it's such varied experiences.
Right.
Some of them are horrific. People get their stuff stolen, people get assaulted, not a place they want to go. That's why they go to the subways. On the other hand, I met some people who definitely have some mental illness, and no reasoning is going to get them out of the subway. They're they're dead set on staying there for the night. And so I think that's one of the issues and the kind of problem the MTA is struggling with, I think the city is struggling with, and I think the commuters are struggling with, how to deal with that particular population.
Right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, the menu of options available for the city's homeless population is not the same as it was even a few years ago. There's a program called Advantage. It would provide long-term subsidies. That was shuttered. It lost funding because of the governor and because of the mayor at the time, Bloomberg. If you talk to homeless advocates, if you talk to homeless people, it's these sort of these sort of programs where you're giving a homeless person housing, where you're treating them with dignity and you're giving them stability, that actually tend to be the most successful. New York City has lost one of its most successful of those programs in the last few years.
Well, that's what we're going to spend the rest of the evening talking about, housing, other possibilities of alleviating the situation. We're going to talk and hear from some people who have experienced homelessness themselves and people who are in positions to change policies that could possibly affect this issue. We also understand that a lot of you have written down questions and submitted them, and we hope to get to as many of them as we can throughout the night. So we're going to leave it to Stephen to take us to the next part of the evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Now I'd like to bring out three people to talk about this issue and what the city, state, and MTA can do. We have Liz Krueger, state senator, Kathy Wilde, president and CEO of Partnership for New York City, and MTA board member Larry Schwartz. Wherever, yes, 1, 2, 3. Hello. Thank you all for joining us. I'll just do a quick introduction of the guests here. Sitting next to me is Kathy Wilde, president, CEO of the nonprofit Partnership for New York City. Before her role there, for nearly 2 decades, she helped create and manage affordable housing. She's an expert in housing and economic development, also has the ear of some of the city's most important business and political leaders, and has some great ideas on how to address homelessness in the subways in the city. Sitting next to her is State Senator Liz Krueger, representing East Side of Manhattan from the Upper East Side to the East Village. She's also chair of Finance Committee. She was first elected in 2002 and has been a fierce advocate for the poor for many years before that, as associate director of Community Food Resource Center. Before that, founding director of New York City Food Bank. And she's co-sponsored legislation that would provide a rental subsidy for homeless families, which I'd like to hear more about. And she can speak more about ways to address homelessness. And last but not least, board member Larry Schwartz, what I would consider one of the most outspoken members of the MTA board. He doesn't mince words with the chairman, the union, or fellow board members. close advisor of Governor Cuomo. He served as secretary for Cuomo as well as for Governor David Patterson. As MTA board member, he's chair of the MTA Finance Committee and sits on the Capital Program Oversight and Governance Committees. He's spoken often about the need to address quality of life crimes in the subway and also has some suggestions for what the MTA should be doing about it. So again, thank you all for joining me. Just to kick things off, for context, all three of you have been working and living in New York longer than me. So I'd like just to hear you talk a little bit about why this moment you think is different than in the past. There's been homeless problems in New York City before. Why is this point in time different?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
So in the homelessness issue really came to the fore heavily in 80-81 when Community Service Society did a big analysis and people kind of recognized it as a distinct issue. And at that point in time, in the 1970s, New York City had lost 1 million people who had moved out of the city. We'd lost half our Fortune 500 companies. In that same period, 70s and 80s, we closed our state mental health institutions. About halfway through the 80s, we eliminated SROs, single room occupancy buildings that people didn't want in their neighborhoods. These were all things that caused displacement with the homeless. But at the time, in the 80s, we had a level of building abandonment and city-owned ownership of buildings and cheap places to hang out, to stay, to live, where nobody would bother you. So there was a homeless issue, but it was kind of invisible or managed through the various, those various institutions and networks that in those days. Today, we've got the same kind of issues except for the affordability issue. There's not vacant buildings around to hang out in. There's the subways. So it wasn't a subway issue then, but the problem has not changed. It's simply that there's no place for people to go except for government-funded shelters, which are inadequate.
So I think Kathy's right on some of the numbers in the years, but I think it's just a growth in the sheer number of people who are homeless in the city today, not just the singles that we primarily are talking about in the context of, I think, the subway system, but the massive growth in family homelessness. The more homeless people in the city are children than anyone else, let's not forget that. And because there is literally no affordable housing stock left, a vacancy of nothing for affordable housing stock. We're not building it fast enough. We're not building it cheap enough. And we've allowed, although hopefully now we reversed ourselves as of June, we allowed our rent regulation system to collapse in on itself, so there were fewer and fewer affordable units. People fell out of the affordable housing they had, and they ended up in the streets and in our shelters. I think the growing single population in the subways is not necessarily new, it's just more. I mean, I've been using the subways of New York City since 1983. There were always homeless people in the subways. I actually could go back to the early 70s when I didn't live here, but I would come into the city and have incidents with homeless people in the subways back then. And I also think it's really important when we're talking, I've been listening to all your reporting, when you're talking about quality of life incidents on the subway. Not every time a crime happens on the subway is it a homeless person responsible. And in fact, the vast majority of homeless people anywhere are far more likely to be victims of crime than the actual people committing the crimes. And I think that's really important for us to think through as a policy debate goes forward.
Larry, do you think the homeless population in the subway now is any different than it was in the 80s from your perspective at the MTA?
You know, I don't know whether or not it's better or worse. I think it's hard to compare, and I'm not really sure that the MTA or anybody else has really had good, accurate statistics. You know, part of the challenge and the problem is one of perception and one of optics. Clearly, the MTA, the New York City transit system, even the commuter rails, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, has come under a lot of scrutiny because of a deterioration in the system, performance issues. So everything has gotten tremendous press attention and press coverage, I think for the right reasons for the most part. So a lot of issues that people generally may have glossed over and not really thought about or focused on have really come to light. Now, I think we are making improvements in terms of the performance of the system under Andy Byford and the leadership of the governor. But we're also trying to focus on other kind of quality of life issues, such as, the issue of criminal recidivists. And we hear these kind of horror stories about individuals continuing to sexually attack people on our subways. Look, I think everyone at the MTA wants to help the homeless. We don't want to stigmatize them. We want to help them. These people have, whether it's mental health issues or they have other challenges. I mean, I will say to you, as someone that regularly rides the subway, I ride the Lexington line almost every day when I come to work in the city. I've noticed an increase in homelessness at Grand Central Station, on the subway platforms, but even more importantly is panhandling that's going on actually on the subway cars. And that to me becomes more of a challenge and an issue because people are in a very tight, confined space. And whether or not these people are actually homeless or not, what they claim to be homeless, if you watch the body language of individuals that are sitting there, for a lot of them, they're very uncomfortable because they can't go anywhere, they can't move, they can't walk around it or walk somewhere else. So I just think that we need to help these individuals. A lot of them come down into the subways or wherever they go because they don't want to be out on the streets. They're looking for shelter. They're looking for a place to sleep. They're trying to find a place to be safe. We understand that. I think we need to do a better job with our not-for-profits and with our police to help these people so they're not sleeping in the subway cars and they're not sleeping in the stations. They're getting the kind of treatment and help that they need and deserve.
Well, do you guys think there's anything the MTA is doing that's right to help the homeless? Is there anything the city and state are doing that's right to help the homeless in the subways? Specifically in the subways.
So the same way it's true you're not a homeless person, you're a person who happens to be homeless at this time. You might be in the subway at 4 a.m. and out in our neighborhoods at 3 p.m, right? So I think the city actually has, the city of New York has actually improved the model of doing homeless outreach on the streets of the city. I've seen significant improvement in both the quality and the number of people the city has out on the streets in outreach teams, continually trying to reach out to people who probably are some of the most vulnerable and get them to be willing to come in for some kind of services. The catch-22 is if you build that relationship, and it takes a lot of time to build trust. That old line, you're not really paranoid if they are after you. So I think a lot of people on the streets, there's a reason they are the way they are.
I think
so, but the city doesn't have enough places to bring them to. So we're desperately short of the model programs such as Safe Horizons that have been successful, adequate shelter beds. Bellevue Men's Shelter is right on the border of my district, which is the intake for all men into the homeless shelter system. There are people who are dropped off by New York State Corrections when they get out of jail, left at the front door. They have mental illness issues. They have readjustment to society issues. They're not being offered anything, but here's the front door to the scariest place in the shelter system.
But
Right.
The other thing that we didn't mention is the couple thousand fewer inmates at Rikers, most of whom quality of life issues were arrested for. They've now, to the extent that's been decriminalized, they're getting out of Rikers, and it coincides in the last 2 years, the couple thousand fewer inmates with Rikers with the rise in the population. And I think the fact is today, that most people who are low income and homeless, which is usually coincident, cannot do anything to help themselves, because there's just, if you don't have resources in this city, there's just, at this point, no place to go. Everything's full, the beds are full, the sheltered housing is full, everything's full. So I think the MTA, the city, which is spending over $3 billion a year dealing with the cost of homelessness, and the state have a series of task force efforts now where they're trying to see what to do, and certainly HRA, the city, has been working on this. So I think there's a lot of look at this, but there's no easy solution.
I think the positive thing too is, the governor announced asking and calling on the MTA to create this homeless task force to look at the issue of homelessness in the mass transit ecosystem in a kind of holistic way, and look at all the problems. We have some really good people on the task force. Sarah Feinberg, who I serve with on the board, used to be the head of Federal Railway Administration, is very good. We have a lot of new board members, very smart. This is a new board that's taking a very proactive approach. And I think the governor's engaged. And the governor has a lot of experience and expertise in the area of homelessness. So I really think that we're going to start to, roll up our sleeves and kind of address this problem and come up with some real good solutions to try to address it.
This homeless task force is new, right?
Yeah.
And the MTA has a $51.5 billion capital plan it just approved. Is there any money that's going to be going directly toward addressing the homeless issue from that plan, or, through this task force?
They're all looking at me.
Finance chairman of the MTA, yes.
I can't tell you there's money to build homeless shelters. I mean, look, we get criticized. The capital plan that's put together has an historic amount of money to provide accessibility to stations and to fix the system. You can never come up with enough money. There's certainly, the operating budget will come out in October, and that's really where we need to spend the money wisely to address this issue in terms of providing additional staffing, resources. Obviously, it was announced the hiring of additional police officers. We also need to invest wisely in hiring the right not-for-profit organizations to work with the MTA and our police to help these individuals, to go into Grand Central, Penn Station, down into the subway stations, and work to help these people and get them the services that they need, whether it's shelter, housing services, or drug treatment services, whatever it is that they need. And so it's got to be a collective effort by everyone, the state, the city, the not-for-profit community, the law enforcement community. We all got to be working together in partnership on this thing. Finger pointing doesn't solve anything. Playing a blame game doesn't solve anything. So we need to help the homeless both above ground and below ground.
Can I just add? I'm perfectly happy to complain about the MTA. It's a very easy assignment for anyone who lives in New York City. But I actually don't think the MTA should get the MTA problem solved. I'm not sure that they are the magic answer for homelessness. So no disrespect to that your board is starting a task force, and you do have some terrific people managing the MTA and new members of the board. I confirm them all. But
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see. We will see. But, I don't think necessarily that's the right group of people who should be evaluating and coming up with answers to the problems of homelessness. Yes, sometimes homeless people are in your system, as sometimes they are on our street corners, in our neighborhoods, on our parks. When it gets cold, anywhere that they can get warm, where there's food, anywhere that they can get food. But it's not really an MTA job description, I would argue. So if you want to be helpful, great. If you actually have extra money and you want to use it for building affordable housing, then maybe your capital plan is too big. If we've given you enough money to start going into the housing business, I'd rather giving it to people who build housing.
Well,
But
we'll lobby you in the next state
Okay.
budget for more
I
money
know
for
you
housing
will.
and shelters.
You good, please do. But I don't.
No, I think
Don't get
Liz has
confused.
put her finger on it, that the topic of the panel and the nexus between the subways and the homeless are going to be a problem. You may get them out of the subways. That does not solve the problem.
Right. And with all due respect, hiring 500 police to chase them out of the subway, if you don't have any place for them to go, I wouldn't spend the money.
But I listen, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Senator Krueger. I've worked with her for many, many years in Albany. I would probably respectfully disagree. We're not hiring police to chase people out of there. The police are there to work with the not-for-profit community providers to help address and provide help and services to get these people out in a humane and respectful way. And it is an MTA responsibility because we run the mass transit system. There are stations. The riding public holds the MTA accountable. When they go down there, whether the tracks are dirty, the stations are dirty, whether there are homeless people there, whether there's crime there, it's the MTA's fault. So you cannot separate out as much as you might like to and just say our job is only to run the trains and make sure they run on time and the trains are clean. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's not easy just to say do this and don't worry about doing that. So again, it's a quality of life issue. I think we all have a responsibility and we need to work together, the city and state. And again, I just, I'm biased when it comes to Governor Cuomo. I think I've known this individual for nearly 30 years. I watched what he did with HELP. I actually helped him create homeless housing in Suffolk County when nobody wanted it, or in other places around the state when nobody wanted it because it was stigmatized. And this is an individual who's been able to successfully challenge some of the most difficult problems when people said it can't get done, it won't happen. He's made it happen. So I think the fact that he's engaged, we're going to see a difference over the next, 3, 6, 9, 12 months.
Can we got a question from the audience I'd like to read, and I think, Kathy, you might be good to answer this. From Melina Morris, I believe. She wants to know how New York City businesses can best help address this issue.
Well, hopefully we help as taxpayers and employers. Most of the issues, I was talking to the head of the City Health and Hospitals Corporation, and we're talking about trying to help them with some of their issues. So 60% of the inpatient mental health are in the city public hospital system because nobody else wants to deal with them. So this is a complex issue. I think business has some of the organizational expertise and resources to be able to help with the problem. It's not really, we haven't organized around the problem comprehensively really in a number of years. And I think there are specific policies that are out there, the legislation that you're talking about keeping people from becoming homeless, which is by trying to help pay their rent and when they get in a crisis situation. Mm-hmm. I don't think that we can say NYCHA and public housing are an answer. In the 80s, we said, so the homeless families go to the top of the list of the NYCHA housing. That tended to create concentrations of severe problems in the NYCHA housing that kind of made trouble and made the conditions there worse for everybody else, and we didn't put in the services to support it. So it's a tough problem. I think business is absolutely prepared to be there to support and certainly support a number of the nonprofit homeless service organizations, but we haven't really had a concerted, comprehensive plan since we worked together in the 80s.
Well, the business community could join Kathy and Larry and I in encouraging the governor to follow through on the commitment. So we have a $20 billion affordable housing commitment from the state, of which I believe half of it is for supportive housing. I think I just heard that 6,000 units have been rolling out, but there's another 14,000. And we're not moving it fast enough. We need to move that money faster because that is one of the most successful models for exactly the vulnerable single adult population I think we're primarily talking about in the subway system. People who, when they have a stable place to live with some supportive services, and it's amazing how the research shows even light supportive services can actually get people stabilized and able to focus on the rest of their lives. So if we can get that other 14,000 units of supportive housing built sooner than later, I think it would dramatically go to reducing the problems you're seeing.
How much,
in the
and this is a
MTA.
real question, how much of the slow pace of the housing is because of NIMBY concerns and people not wanting homeless shelters and homeless housing in their neighborhoods?
My understanding is there are groups who are ready to put shovel in the ground, but the state says we're only approving X number per year, so they're ready sooner than we're prepared to give them the money.
Okay.
I think the next panel might be prepared to talk about that, actually.
Stay tuned. Thank you, all three of you, for coming and for your thoughts.
Thanks.
Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Thank you. And up next, we have Shumita, who's going to introduce our next guests.
Hi, everyone. I am here to introduce the next act. I'm also here to stay out of Ricardo's way. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, for a microphone. Before I do that, though, I want to address, we had one of the questions that came through before the show started. This is from Connie in the West Village. And Connie wrote, I volunteer at a soup kitchen near the West 4th Street subway station. How do we let people know about us? Connie, where are you? A mic is coming to you. Do you want me to hand it to her? Yes. No, I'll bring it to her. Yeah, you're busy. Connie, this is how you tell people about you. Please tell everyone about the soup kitchen that you volunteer at.
Well, yeah, it's at St. Joseph's Church on the corner of, it's on 6th Avenue between Washington Place and Waverly. And we've been there for 40 years. It was a response to the homeless crisis from the 80s when faith-based organizations were asked to step up and see what they could do. And we actually have seen a decrease in our attendees. Our busiest day was in the mid-90s. We served 700 meals. It's also, keep in mind, it was meals, not people. So we let people go through multiple times. Last Saturday, we served 338. So I think it's been the development of the Hudson River Parkway, and that was where that community lived for a long time. So anyway, we're there, and we serve Saturdays from 1:30 until 3. We have capacity, so we would welcome more people.
Connie, it sounds like you've been there for a long time. How long have you been volunteering there?
Since 91.
Since 91.
Mm-hmm. We're an all-volunteer organization, so lots of people. No, lots of support. So,
How can people get involved if they want to help?
Well, actually, we may be looking for a new location because the basement's going through a renovation, and we are running into some challenges there. We actually suffer from an embarrassment of riches with volunteers. We have a website, sjsk.nyc.
sjsk.nyc.
St. Joseph Soup Kitchen.
Okay.
And but we do have a lot of volunteers because we're affiliated with NYU, so we have great support from students. We get great support from high school students who have their outreach commitments. So we do great with that. And tips on how we can be more green as we do our service. That would be helpful.
Find Connie after the event's over and talk to her about any housing or relocation or locations that you can think of to help them out. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
And now I want to introduce a special performance by Theater of the Oppressed NYC. The theater's mission is to partner with communities fighting against oppression to inspire transformative action through theater. Their goals are to build community, solidarity, and awareness, and their work is guided by several core principles. That any discussion of a social problem should center on the voices of those directly affected, that unscripted live encounters have immense potential for transformational change, and that community-based art and activism can influence structural change. So tonight we'll be seeing a performance by their experimental rapid response troupe, that's comprised of alumni actors. So please give a very warm welcome to the troupe.
What's up, y'all? Again, my name is Liz Morgan, and we are Theater of the Oppressed NYC's Rapid Response Troupe. We're used to doing things that engage the audience, so that's why I'm breaking the fourth wall before we begin. So have a question for those of you out here before we begin. Just raise your hand if you have any problems. Anything else? All right, thank God, we came to the right place. We have problems too, and so the play that you are about to see is based on our real life problems, our real life experiences of homelessness and other problems that we've faced. And so you'll see a representation of those issues in the play, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So the way that we like to start all of our plays is by actually having y'all in the audience give us a 3, 2, 1 action before we begin. And so actors, are you ready?
Yes.
Great. So I'm gonna step off stage, and then if y'all could say 3, 2, 1 action all together. 3, 2, 1, action!
Next stop,
You shake, struggling veteran, this survival this peace. Appreciate support. From the deserts of where my comrades lie, to the empty and sad streets of the city.
Sir. Could you
My problems lie within my pocket,
side?
an empty wallet and a sad soul. What is the price of a life? Mine reached the nation's
Sir?
billions without a dime in sight. Truth coming to light. Enslaved legal employees
Excuse
struggle
me?
for green financial tickets and checks day and night. Their money. Not able if I'm accepted or approved for public assistance.
Excuse me,
SSI,
sir.
SSD.
Every
Their money
day with
can't
this-
support and take care of my family. I was given what was promised to me. Fought for my family, fought for my comrades, fought for the young youths and those unborn lives of truth. Yet everything promised to me was taken away. So as I stand before thee, empty man with no
Need some
promises.
assistance?
Please
Police
help me.
officers, hello?
I
Hello?
beg your
Sir,
pardon,
sir,
sir.
what's the
I was
problem?
just
Why are you
doing a
stopping
poem.
the
What's
Please,
the
could
problem?
you get this man out of here?
What?
He smells
I beg your pardon?
like piss
Buddy,
and
buddy, I
dust.
need you to come with me.
Officer,
Disturbing
how
everybody.
did I assist you? I just
Get
doing a
away.
poem. I'm not
Buddy, can you come with me? You're disturbing the other
What's
the other
going on
passengers.
here?
How am I disturbing the
Can
passengers?
you just come with me and don't argue? Come with me.
Come on, you have to get off. I'm already late for work. Come on, my first day.
Thank you.
Come on.
Go onto the platform and talk for a second. You're all right.
Final.
Just come onto the platform for a second.
Is there
Jeez.
what seems to be the issue, officer? What seems to be the issue?
Can you just follow my finger real quick?
What do I have to follow your finger for?
Sir, what were you doing on the train?
All I was doing was just performing a poetry. I wasn't disturbing the peace. I wasn't
Do
doing
you have a
anything.
permit to perform poetry?
I
brother,
didn't have
man, you don't need a permit.
I need a permit.
Sir,
I'm a
You don't need a
veteran.
permit to speak on the train, bro.
Are you the police or am
It's
I?
like,
I'm just telling the brother his rights.
I'm a damn veteran,
I
and
know
you
the
want to tell me
rights
I'm
of the
supposed to
police.
get a permit just to
Summertime.
Buddy,
perform?
are you living on the train?
I am living on. I don't have nothing.
All right, so I want you to come downtown with me. We're gonna figure out a way to get you into a shelter. All right?
Shelter? What do you mean shelter?
Yeah,
What? You
because
want me to?
can't
I'm
be
not
living on
going
the
through
train.
no
You
hell in
can't
no
be performing your
shelter.
poetry on the train without a permit.
But brother, man, like I told you, bro.
Sir, I'm not gonna tell you again.
Are you?
Yo, officer friendly. I'm just trying to give him a little.
Officer, you know what? Let me see your ID.
This is
Oh,
what I
man,
get.
come on.
This is the
There you
shit.
go. But brother, man, you don't have to say anything. You know what? Do your poetry, my brother.
It's a First Amendment freedom of
That's
speech.
right, freedom of speech. That's
I'm a
right.
damn veteran, and after all this shit I get through for this country for decades,
All right,
this is what I
John,
get.
summertime. It's your lucky day. You're coming downtown with me instead of your
What you
friend.
talking about?
You have a warrant out for your arrest for jumping the turnstile.
Yo,
Turn
I
around.
read that.
Turn,
Yo, I
turn
read that.
Nobody's
around.
recording this.
Oh, come on, man.
Hello.
Stay off my train.
Stay off my. You mean stay out my house? That's what you're trying to say? Cause that's where I'm. That's where I. What? So I'm just getting. You're just looking down there. And you're just looking at me like I'm just a damn fool. Not. You just seen that, right? That was just a complete. And you're not saying anything. Hello. And I don't ask for much. All I do is I just perform my poetry. I just say my poetry. That's what I have. That's all I have. I've been fighting for this country for decades, and this is all I get. How about you? You're not saying anything. You're just stuck there.
I'm shocked that you went
that you-
at it with the police like that.
All my life, I've been doing this. I've been fighting for this Uncle Sam, serving for Uncle Sam, and this is what I get. I had to fucking do a little bit of training, which I had to shoot a target whether I miss or I hit it, and then I was just shipped overseas just to kill children and other civilians that I don't know, from an enemy to a civilian. Are you serious? So much for this
I'm in
picture.
the same boat as you. I'm homeless too.
You can't be homeless. Impossible for you to be homeless. You're young and healthy. You in a job. First off, where you from? Well, who are you? Why are you here? Wait, what's the purpose of you being here? You looking all dressed up and all this other stuff, and talking about you being homeless. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about me and how I'm in the same boat as you. I remember my mother. She said to me,
Nakisha, ven que te cociné un sancocho. ¿Cómo tú te sientes? I cooked your favorite soup, sancocho. Look, taste it.
oh, mucha caliente. I love it.
I have a surprise for you. Your visa came. You're going to New York on Friday. So get yourself ready and get the avocado for this soup, okay?
Nah, Mom, I can't. I gotta stay here with you and Papi.
No, stop. Papi has a broken back. Your brothers are lawyers and they can't even pay their own rent in this country. I need you to go to New York. Stay with your cousin Roberto.
God,
Stop! Listen! I'm not playing with you. I love you. You're my daughter, and I know what's best for you. I want you to go to New York, stay with your cousin in Brooklyn until you get on your feet. Go now.
And that's what I did. I did what my mother told me to do. I came to New York to find a better life. And I went to my cousin Robbie. She told me that he would take care of the rent. And when I get to the house, Robbie told me that he's gonna pay 2 months rent. I have not seen Robbie ever since. And now I have this crazy landlord always knocking and
Bang, bang, bang! Bang, 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 bang!
nobody's here.
Bang, 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 bang! Robert, I know you're in there. Robert? Robert?
Hi, how my favorite landlord in the world.
no.
How are you? I just fixed the roof over there. Yeah, and the leak. I fixed the leak in the water. So everything should be taken care of.
Okay. Do you know the reason why I'm here?
To do more work? The deal me and you had?
The deal is off.
Let me understand.
First of all,
Hey, wait. I have some money.
what money?
I have $200.
That ain't enough to pay the rent. You owe 6 months.
But what about the work and the labor that I'm doing?
Where is Robert? Robert's not here?
Now let me
Okay, so you have two choices. You either I make that quick phone call to immigration, ICE, or
You're gonna
you
do that
come
to
up
me
with
after
6
everything I did
months
for
worth
you?
of rent for $3,000. And by the way, you have to go to court. Here's eviction notice. Enjoy.
Gee, I could use the money to buy some new clothes.
I work for that lady hard. I come to this country. And it's not like I didn't try to get jobs. I fill out applications. In fact, every job I go to, it's the same thing. Hello.
Hi, so it says here that you have some of the qualifications, but you're
Yeah, the degree is from my country, yeah.
yeah, about that. So the credits on your degree don't translate in this country. So I wouldn't be able, or am I verified to hire?
Now, let me tell you this. I've worked very hard for this
And trust
education.
me, I believe you, and I truly do. But I don't have the power to hire you. I'm sorry.
There's nothing you can do.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's my story. And now I'm homeless. just like you.
You got me on that one. You got me on that one, kid. If there was any hope, I'll be satisfied. Anything.
Look, Jehovah Witness. They have got to have something for us. Look, she
Praise
says,
Jehovah.
wake up, wake up.
The
She
Lord
got
of
the wake.
Lords, King of Kings.
Wake.
There's hope yet.
He will
Let's
make a
try and
way
see
for
if she'll
you.
give us a job.
Yeah, let's see if that happens.
Hey, how are you? Me and my friend.
sister and brother.
Yes, we would like
Jehovah
to
praise
see
you.
Is
employment,
Jehovah gonna give me a job? Or
food.
anything to support me and
He's carrying you through this far. He'll keep you in spirit.
he rarely carried me my whole freaking life after this damn war.
You're
So what are you talking
living.
about?
He walked with me, and you could come tag along.
Wait. Can you give us a job, maybe doing what you do right there? Like, we can do that, hand out flyers.
I know,
Wait
right?
a minute, y'all. I started from the bottom. Now I'm here. But
So what
you
is-
ain't here yet.
What is that supposed to do?
But in the meantime, you could take one of these passages.
Wake. What's
and
wake?
Wake.
When you
God
gonna
will
wake up?
lift you up.
Man,
Praise him.
You know, I really don't understand this country.
this is
Mighty
not
Jehovah.
what we call USA, United States of America.
There's no unity.
It isn't. And it actually stands for
You
you stand
alone.
alone.
This is, you're welcome. Sorry, I was handed the live stream phone, so I was standing off to the side. This is Theater of the Oppressed. Can I just ask, knowing what I know about your theater and about your troupe, who here has experienced homelessness in your life? You have? Yes. Maria, you have as well? Liz, I know you wanted to lead the audience through a little exercise, so I'm going to pass the mic off to you, okay?
Awesome, thanks. So as you could see from this play, homelessness was part of the experience of our two protagonists, but it was at the intersection of other issues as well, immigration, access to health, the shelter system, racism, police harassment. There are all sorts of issues that are impacting the homeless community here in New York City. So what we wanted to ask you all to do is to take a minute to talk to your neighbor about something you might try if you were in the shoes of our two characters, Nikisha from the West Indies, as well as our veteran poet, what you might do if you were in their shoes to access what you need. So talk to your neighbor for a second, for a minute, go. So before we go, hey y'all. I'm glad you all had those discussions. So usually in our work, we might even have one of you step on stage and replace one of those main characters in our play, and we do it again with your new idea. But since we don't have time for that, I was wondering if anyone, a couple people, could share something that they discussed with their neighbor. Any ideas come up in that quick brainstorm?
For the young lady from the Caribbean, there's a translation service. I don't look it up. I don't recall the name, but there's a service that you can get your education translated to see how you can get credits. Yeah, there is a service, a legitimate service.
Thank you for that. Something came up back there. I don't know if we have another mic, but I can. Awesome, thank you.
No, I suggested since I fulfill this role myself, if somebody is homeless, they should try to identify somebody in the regular world who is in a position who can help this person. Maybe to have their apartment serve as a mail drop, to have a place to go when they've just been ripped off, their wallet has been stolen for the third time. I'm walking around with a bag with a driver's license and a transit card for somebody that just a homeless person sleeping in the subway who just lost all of their things. Their wallet, they were sleeping and their pants were just cut with a pocket. I thought this person was going to be here tonight, but something else has come up apparently. But if the homeless person could just find one other person, surely, I mean, maybe they're not totally alone in the world who can take care of or help them with a few small things. It might help out.
So, I guess we have one more thing back there.
Yeah, this didn't come up in our partnering, but when the underused soup kitchen came up, often I have cards that have Canva, where a friend of mine works, and I say to the person, do you know about Canva and the services they offer? And I would think that the subway every car could be filled with, instead of advertisements only, did you know there are 6 soup kitchens within, 12 blocks? Did you know? And cards. So I think it's a question of using, marketing, the skills that we have to get the word out where there is resource is part of it.
Do we have time for one more? I think, I see somebody over there.
I can be loud. I just was going to say, we didn't talk about this expressly, but I feel like folks who are experiencing homelessness are probably already pretty resourceful. They're surviving. So something I always like to talk to folks about is their right and ability to file a complaint or just log an issue if they're not receiving a service or they're not receiving it properly or they're being mistreated by perhaps someone who's supposed to be providing a service. So there's all different ways, but one I really like is filing a complaint with HRA. There's it's called Letter to the Commissioner, and it's a page on, if you just Google Letter to the Commissioner complaint HRA, and they get back to you because they don't want that floating around. So.
Well, thank you everyone who shared, and I know we didn't get to try out the ideas on stage, but I know one of our actors will be speaking a little bit more about her experiences, and perhaps we'll have a chance to talk about what makes some of those ideas hard and what makes some of those ideas possible. So thank you again for having us, and I'll pass the mic back.
But you're coming right back out. Yeah. Okay. Thanks again to Theater of the Oppressed. They're called the Rapid Response Troupe. Now, we wanted to end tonight's event with a conversation about helping and humanizing, so I'm glad that we ended on this brainstorming note, because we're going to continue that. We've heard from so many commuters and so many of our listeners the same thing. We've heard a lot of people say, I wish I knew what I could do to help. So we have convened this group to end tonight. This group of people to talk about what is being done right now through outreach programs, what is and what isn't working, and what you as individuals can do. So please welcome my panelists out. And Maria, you'll recognize to my right, was just part of the troupe. Maria Teresa Wallace, she's an actor and delegate with Theater of the Oppressed. To her right is Josh Dean, the executive director of the advocacy group Human.nyc. And Giselle Routhier is the policy director at the Coalition for the Homeless, to my far right. Thank you all. Welcome. Maria, I would like to start with you. If you could start just by telling us a little bit about your experience while you were homeless, while you were experiencing homelessness. And I understand there were 2 different periods in your life where you were experiencing homelessness, and you did spend quite a lot of time on the subways.
Yes. From The first time was like maybe like 3-4 years. Second time was like 4 years. The first time, in and out the shelter system, experienced the fact that I was back and forth on the subway with my husband. I'm sorry. I had someone in my life that just recently passed away. He was dear to me, and we did the shelter system together. And we rode the trains, mostly the trains and sometimes the buses. But the trains was the experience that luckily I had someone, we watched each other's back. My experience, like as far as outreach workers dealing with the subways, they didn't really come to us, we went to them. And I didn't have no problems as a couple, but the second time I did it by myself, still didn't have no problems, but then at the same time I still had to watch my bags, my belongings, my ID. You know, I was fortunately lucky.
Maria, what would you say your interactions were like with other people on the subways?
I stayed on my guard. I already knew the schedule. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, it was rush hour. I stayed alert, I stayed awake. I just made sure that I knew what I was doing, but then at the same time, I would take naps here and there. I survived it both times. I survived it in a way where it was so much for me to handle, dealing with depression, dealing with anxieties, dealing with someone that's gone through so much that it hurts to separate the family, dealing with the fact that it was so much for me to handle the fact that I had to ride these trains back and forth because I wasn't eligible to stay inside the shelter. And it's a process, but then at the same time, there was your good and there was your bad, because I had someone that was with me that always stuck by me no matter what. The first time. Second time, I did by myself, but then at the same time, I always stayed on my guard. We're not criminals. You know, we're trying to survive. We don't trust the system. And if an outreach worker did approach me, I'll be scared because I'm like, oh, dude, are they still going to deny me? Or I'll just go to a drop-in center and stay there for a couple of days. Stay there for 10 days so I get that paper, that letter saying that, oh, I stayed here for 10 days so I could be eligible for either family or AFLEC, which is Adult Family Center, where you had to apply for so you could get temporary shelter. The only thing that bothers me the most is that you can't trust the system because they're afraid that things get stolen. Mostly your things just get stolen. Curfews, can't cook. You have to rely on soup kitchens. It depends where you stay at, even at the hotels. You know, sometimes they may not provide food. You have to go out and buy your own food. You have to dig into your husband's wallet and be like, oh, okay, this is what we're gonna eat, McDonald's, Burger King, or whatever how you gonna survive. It's really rough out here. I mean, thank God I was lucky I had somebody. But then at the same time, they may not have that support system that they need. They can't trust the system. How are you gonna trust the system if the shelters are falling apart? Where's the money going? You know, they got these service providers, but then at the same time, do you trust them? Okay, well, we'll see you but so many days. We have to make sure that you're here at the same spot, which is true.
Right, you're referring to the fact that outreach workers, they have to log a certain number of times that they've seen you in the same place before they can verify that you've been there.
And I don't think it's fair. Yeah. I don't think it's right because you're supposed to help me to get the service I need. I want to be off the street so I can better myself, so I can take care of my family, or do what I have to do so I could get my place. There's so many buildings out here, it's not even funny. I'm sorry I'm getting off the subject, but taking that long subway train, the A train, the F, the G, the 1, 2, and 3, It's so much to handle. You know, you have to be on your P's and Q's. You gotta make sure your bags don't get stolen. That's the most, making sure you got your ID. You know.
Maria, I want to come back to you. I want to hear more about your experience with the shelter system as well. But I want to acknowledge the fact that the city's directive to people, if they see a person who appears to be homeless and in need of a shelter, the directive is to call 311. Giselle, can you talk about what happens when someone calls 311?
Well, typically that will mean that they will have an outreach provider try to find the person that the call has been made about. But I think a lot of valid points have been made in a lot of the panels before us and in the Theater of the Oppressed show. When an outreach provider, A, they may not be able to find the person because they may come 45 minutes, an hour later, a person might not be there anymore. B, they're not equipped with the tools that are actually needed to help a person who's homeless. So even if you're interacting with an outreach provider who may have the best of intentions, who may be caring about this person, who may want to help, what they currently have to offer if they meet someone for the first time is to tell them where the intake center is for the shelter system, which many people who are on the streets already know about and are have been in the shelter system many times, are unwilling to enter the shelter system, or the option is to wait for 9 months and let them see you where you are in order to be eligible for a safe haven bed, which is a lower threshold, higher service level model of shelter that is really great, but there are actually not a lot of beds.
And you said it's 9 months that they have to see you.
That's
for.
typically
Is that
what
right?
we hear. You basically have to meet the definition of being chronically homeless. And so it's they're allocating a scarce resource and trying to figure out who is most eligible, but it's problematic in a lot of ways because people fall through the cracks. And at the end of the day, there's not enough low threshold shelters for people who are averse to entering the large bureaucratic shelter system. And frankly, the most important thing that everybody's, I think, been talking about is there's just not enough housing.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't have people staying in shelters for over a year, multiple years, on the streets for multiple years if there was actually a system in place to move people into housing quickly if we had that housing available.
Let's talk about how that outreach is implemented and what it looks like in practice and how people are approached. I think that's really a question that I have, especially for you, Josh, because you've done this largely on your own. Your organization, Human.nyc, started as largely a listening project, right? You kind of set out to just go and listen to people who are experiencing homelessness. Can you talk about how you approach people and how you make that decision to approach people and what you're offering them?
Yeah, so the way that our organization operates is we'll identify someone who's maybe holding a sign, and for us that's consent. If they're holding a sign, they're asking to be approached and they're asking for help. If we see someone who might appear to be homeless and we're not sure, normally we'll smile. If they smile back, we might go and start a conversation with them. But the first thing that we do is we offer a pair of socks. Socks are the most needed, least donated article of clothing for folks who are homeless. So generally when the conversation starts with, hey, do you need a pair of socks? The response is overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, when I was telling Maria who else was on the panel, and I mentioned you, she's, oh, the socks guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he's the socks guy.
That's how I'm known around the streets. I think more people know me as the sock dude than Josh. We work with Bombas, which is an amazing company that donates a pair of socks for every pair of socks they sell. So we're well stocked with socks. But that is, the conversations that we start are different than the conversations that outreach team starts because we're not necessarily, trying to convince someone to go to shelter, or we don't have to work through them with this, 9-month bureaucratic process to document their homelessness. So the challenge that I think the city's outreach workers face is, like Giselle said, there's a scarce resource at the end of the line.
Yeah.
And the challenge that they have is they need to ration that scarce resource to whoever, quote unquote, deserves it more. And when you need to decide who deserves something more, that creates a lot of paperwork, and that's always going to fall in the lap of the person who's actually trying to get the help that they're asking for. So what we really need at the end of the day is to increase the amount of supportive housing that's available. We're seeing right now a 14-year low in the number of placements to supportive housing. We need to increase the safe haven capacity. To the credit of this administration, they've tripled that. But if you look at the capacity in the census, the lines virtually overlap because the supply is so far exceeded by the demand. So we've got a long way to go, and the outreach teams right now are in a really difficult position because there's not much they can often do to help. And Maria, it sounds like you've been in a lot of situations where the outreach teams weren't able to offer you the help that you wanted in terms of getting actual housing.
I should mention that when we're talking about these outreach teams, often what we're referring to here is the fact that the MTA has a contract with the Bowery Residents Committee for them to do homeless outreach on the subways. And we did reach out to BRC about tonight's event. They did not respond. We would have liked to have heard more about their outreach. And I know, Josh, that you've been critical of their approach when they do literally approach people out on the subways and stations.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're critical of BRC's approach, actually. I think that they are in a difficult situation. The metaphor I like to use is that getting frustrated at BRC is like getting frustrated at ticket vendors for not selling tickets to a sold-out movie. They've got really no place to bring people. So I think, they're out and doing the best that they can in what is otherwise a broken system. And it's tough to be critical of the front line when the back-end supply has let us down so much.
Yeah. We got a question from Bill from New Jersey. He asked, when approaching a homeless person showing signs of mental illness, how would you proceed? Would anyone like to take that question from an outreach perspective?
I mean, I think it depends on how you're kind of judging what the situation is. I mean, one thing that I thought was really illuminating, and I wanted to bring this up on the panel, that Theater of the Oppressed scooped me on, was when you're sitting in a subway car, you may see someone who you stereotypically think is a homeless person. But there may be 10 other people on that car that are homeless. They're maybe going to their job, they're maybe going to the path, trying to apply for shelter, they may go to the Adult Family Intake Center to try to apply for shelter, they may be bringing their kids to school. And so a lot of times we get caught up in this conversation of just very much segmenting people into these stereotypical boxes. So and I would also say that mental illness is not exclusive to people who are homeless. People who are housed have mental illness. Mental illness is something that is prevalent in our society. And so whether or not you approach someone who's exhibiting signs of what you may anticipate to be a mental illness, you don't really know what their diagnosis is. It may be a manifestation of a physical health issue. It may be sleep deprivation, as Josh was saying before. But the ultimate thing to do is just treat people with dignity and treat people with respect. If they're asking you for help, take it at face value. And try to do the best you can in that moment to treat people with dignity and like human beings.
Yeah, I want to add on that. Giselle and I were talking backstage about sleep deprivation, and you may see someone and your immediate judgment is that person may have a mental illness. But what it very well may be is that they spent the last night on the subway, and all night the cops were banging batons on their seats and waking them up and asking them to sit upright. Yeah. If you've ever seen someone who's homeless and you see their feet and their ankles are swelling, that's in large part because they've been asked to sleep sitting up. If you see somebody who's, like I said, may appear to have a mental illness, that could very well be because they have only slept a couple hours in the last few days. So our team has been canvassing the subways between the hours of 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. and seeing what's going on. And what we've seen is police officers who clearly don't want to be doing this. That's not what they signed up to do. But for whatever reason, they've been asked to wake up homeless people and ask if they're okay and if they need services and make sure that they're sitting up and not taking up more than one seat, even when the car is empty. And I've watched people been woken up, and I don't like being woken up. I don't think anyone likes being woken up. So it's never going to be a positive experience when that's the strategy for outreach.
Maria, I want to give you the last word, which is I want to ask you, what would you like for people to consider and think about and understand about your experience, especially people who are trying to think of how they can be helpful?
Just need a support system. You need a line of friends or family or different service providers that provide the services that you really, really need and you trust, and they're willing to help you to get out the situation that you're in. It doesn't matter if your kid is in one place but you're in another, but they want y'all to both be together. So my saying is that homeless, you're not a criminal if you're homeless. because you never know. You could be dressed nice and you still consider homeless. It doesn't matter if your complexion of your skin. The only thing I say is that if they want the services, it's up to them. Riding those trains back and forth every day, it's a lot. But then at the same time, it's up to them if they want the services. You can't force somebody to go into the shelter system if they don't want to. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth. You cannot force somebody to go into the shelter system if they don't want it. If that's all they could think about is being outside, chronically homeless. But when they're ready, they are ready. You know, they could have a master's, associate's, GED, high school diploma. You never know. And if you strike a good conversation with them, like, okay, this person got, okay, all right. But you never know. You just never know. But there is help out there. Soup kitchens, churches, just even going to your primary care. They could try to help you the best way they can. The hospitals are flooded with homeless men and women, even families. Because I know from experience.
Maria, we're going to have to leave it there. My guests have been Maria Teresa Wallace with Theater of the Oppressed, Josh Dean from Human.nyc, and Giselle Routhier from the Coalition for the Homeless. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. And we will be covering this and following this in our reporting as well. I hope you follow along. Thank you very much.